Por mais que a ciência afirme que devamos consumir glicose e oxigênio para o nosso bem, não seria prudente confiar nosso estilo de vida a teorias, sem antes obter uma prova prática. Para isso, devemos avaliar as condições de saúde das populações que vivem fisicamente ativas, comendo basicamente amido, antes de empreendermos sérias mudanças em nossas vidas. A saúde das nações é estudada através da relação estatística entre fatos e doenças. Foi desta forma que os chamados estudos epidemiológicos confirmaram a alta incidência das doenças cardiovasculares em populações com elevado consumo de gordura e colesterol. Por outro lado, condições precárias de vida, como a escassez de alimentos e a falta de saneamento básico, se encontram relacionadas a doenças infecciosas, como a tuberculose. O aumento da produção mundial de alimentos e a urbanização alteraram o perfil da nossa saúde, e doenças infecciosas, como a tuberculose, deram lugar a doenças modernas, como o câncer e as enfermidades cardiovasculares. Este fenômeno foi bem documentado nos países desenvolvidos e tem sido observado recentemente nas nações emergentes, como a Índia, a China, a África do Sul e o Brasil. Isso não significa que a tuberculose sumiu do Brasil, ou que as doenças modernas não existissem anteriormente, mas que a tuberculose cedeu o lugar de principal causa de morte em nossa população para doenças como o câncer e o infarto agudo do miocárdio. Dentre os diversos estudos epidemiológicos em andamento, o projeto da China se destaca pela qualidade e o volume de dados coletados para análise estatística no meio científico. Tendo início em 1983, o estudo pôde documentar as mudanças no perfil da saúde provocadas pelo desenvolvimento econômico, revelando fatos de importância vital para a nossa saúde, como afirma um dos responsáveis pelo projeto, o Dr. Colin Campbell, da Cornell University.
Basically, in the study in China, we were measuring a large number of different things that characterize dietary and lifestyle characteristics. Namely, we were measuring blood cholesterol, dietary fat intake, dietary fiber intake, animal protein intake, and a number of other things to give us some sense of the kind of diet that we're consuming. And they were, of course, consuming a low-fat, high-fiber diet, and as a result, experiencing much lower levels of blood cholesterol than we had here in the West.
Populações rurais no Oriente sobrevivem à base de alimentos de origem vegetal, como arroz, trigo, milho ou batata doce, cultivados por eles mesmos em sua região. Fisicamente ativos, eles consomem uma dieta à base de amido, rica em fibras, pobre em gordura e apresentam baixos níveis de colesterol e de doenças modernas, como alguns tipos de câncer e doenças cardíacas. Estas doenças crônicas ou degenerativas também são conhecidas como doenças ocidentais, sem nenhuma conotação racial, pois ao migrar para o Ocidente e assimilar sua cultura, os orientais e seus descendentes passam a sofrer destas enfermidades da mesma forma que os ocidentais.
For example, we explored the relationship between breast cancer and dietary fat within that very low range of fat intake. In this case, I should point out, incidentally, the fat intake represents the intake of animal-based foods, but in any case, what we found was that as fat intake goes up, or I should say animal-based food intake goes up, breast cancer goes up. At the same time, as animal food intake goes up in China from very low levels, age at menarche begins to come down. The average age at menarche amongst young Chinese women is 17 years. The range was from 15 to 19 years. In the West, it's around 11 to 12 years. And we've known for a long time that the earlier the age at menarche, the higher the risk for breast cancer. That's a well-established fact. And so what we've discovered in China was that as animal food intake goes up, especially among young women, And I'm sure the same would happen with young boys or young men as well for other sorts of reproductive cancers. But in any case, as animal food intake goes up, age at menarche begins to decline. That triggers a series of events that go on to subsequently leads to breast cancer later in life. We looked at the relationship between dietary fiber and colon cancer. The higher the fiber intake, the lower the rates of colon cancer. We considered the relationship, let's say, between plasma vitamin C, or I should say vitamin C in the blood, as it related to stomach cancer. And what we found there was that vitamin C, which comes exclusively from plant-based foods, the higher the vitamin C level in the blood, the lower was the rate of stomach cancer. Beta-carotene is yet another vitamin that is an antioxidant that we now know about, but exclusively found in plant-based food. It turns out that the beta-carotene level that is in the blood, as well as the level that's consumed, the higher the consumption or the higher the levels of beta-carotene in the blood, the lower was the rates of various and sundry cancers.
O estudo revelou uma forte associação dietética no câncer de mama, onde o aumento no consumo de alimentos de origem animal eleva o nível de colesterol, acelerando a maturação sexual e a idade da primeira regra no sexo feminino, a menarca. Com uma menarca precoce, as norte-americanas sofrem uma incidência de câncer de mama 15 vezes superior às chinesas. Por outro lado, uma dieta baseada no elevado consumo de alimentos de origem vegetal se encontra associada a baixos níveis de colesterol, câncer e doenças cardíacas, cuja mortalidade entre os chineses é de apenas 11 óbitos por 100 mil habitantes contra 198 dos norte-americanos.
After we completed this study and went back and sort of looked at it in a very comprehensive way, it turned out that every time we looked for a specific relationship between something specific about the diet or lifestyle on the one hand and disease outcome on the other, that these various and sundry relationships that we studied in some depth pointed in the same direction. The richer the diet was in plant-based foods, the lower was the risk of the kind of diseases that most of us in this country succumbed to before our time, namely heart disease, cancers, diabetes, and so forth. And so what this really recommended to us, or showed us, and I should say, is this idea that the relationship between diet and disease is not a function of a specific nutrient intake, as when many of us are wanting to think about, such as with nutrient supplements. Instead, what this study showed us from really a broad point of view, as well as from a relatively in-depth point of view, particularly when we considered the data relative to other studies, what this showed us was that it was a dietary pattern, really, that made the difference as far as these diseases are concerned. Diets that started to include intakes of, or started to include animal-based foods were problematic. And in the China study, what was really quite remarkable was it only took a small amount of these foods to start being associated with increasing levels of blood cholesterol from very low levels. As the range went from, let's say, 90 milligrams per deciliter up to about 170, we could see significant, statistically significant relationships with various cancers and other diseases begin to emerge.
Dr. Campbell esteve interessado em correlacionar o consumo de selênio com a incidência de câncer, mas o estudo da China revelou que as doenças modernas estão relacionadas à substituição do amido e da atividade física das populações rurais por alimentos de origem animal e a mecanização da sociedade moderna, derrubando a hipótese de um elemento específico promover alterações na incidência destas doenças.
Getting that information together with the information that we had in the beginning, focused primarily on animal protein versus plant protein, it began to describe for us the notion that consuming a diet that had animal-based foods in it was really a problem. And this kind of observation really hadn't been noted that much before, or the extent to which it had been noticed, it wasn't too much discussion in the scientific community. In part, in my view, because the studies that are done in the West are not designed in a way in which we can really look at that question. As I pointed out in the beginning, the studies done in the West are focused on cohorts of people who are consuming diets already rich in animal-based foods, and so we all tend to do that, and therefore we can't study these sort of broad dietary patterns quite in that fashion.
O florescimento do desenvolvimento econômico na China em 1983 e a enorme diferença de estilo de vida entre grupos étnicos formaram o cenário ideal para se discernir nitidamente a relação entre hábitos dietéticos e a incidência de doenças. Mas apesar desta enorme sensibilidade estatística, o Dr. Campbell teve o cuidado de investigar outros trabalhos para avaliar a veracidade do seu estudo.
I was particularly interested in exploring the observations that had been done elsewhere in the literature. And it turned out that basically, going back in many years in some cases, the observations that we were making in the China study were in fact supportive of a large number of observations elsewhere. These results also had some important implications about the original Ken Carroll, the Professor Carroll studies, where he showed a high intake of dietary fat being associated with a high risk of breast cancer and other sorts of diseases like that. He focused on fat, and it was that observation actually that led to much of the interest in our society to decrease fat intake, because obviously these studies did in fact specify fat as being a problem. However, if we go back and look at those studies, it turns out that the relationship between fat intake and breast cancer, for example, as well as other diseases, was primarily a relationship not just of total fat, it was specifically a relationship for animal fat, but not plant fat.
Como os alimentos de origem animal contêm colesterol e são compostos por gordura e proteínas, tanto a gordura animal, bem como sua proteína e colesterol, se encontram igualmente associadas ao problema, o que explica o fracasso do consumo de alimentos de origem animal com teor de gordura reduzido, os produtos light, em promover a redução da incidência das doenças modernas em nossa sociedade.
What we learned from the China study, and together with many other kinds of evidence, was that as animal protein intake is increased, in particular animal protein intake, as it's increased from 10 to 20% and higher, that's when the cancers begin to appear, that's when heart disease occurs, that's when blood cholesterol goes up, and that's when all these other diseases begin to occur. So in other words, we're consuming diets much too high in protein, specifically animal protein.
A propriedade anabolizante dos alimentos de origem animal pode favorecer a multiplicação de células malignas, acelerando a evolução do câncer, bem como de outras doenças no corpo. Portanto, importantes estudos populacionais como o da China apresentam provas matematicamente incontestáveis de que nosso corpo seguramente funciona de forma adequada consumindo amido e oxigênio através de uma dieta à base de alimentos de origem vegetal associada a atividades aeróbias.